Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this week's Remote Agile London, which this week is our new and latest event, which is Agile London Super 6. So to give you a little bit of context on the Super 6, I wanted to, we've run a number of events now, Oliver Bernard have, and a number of really successful remote Agile Londons. And I wanted to sort of put together a little bit of a sort of quick fire event where you can hear from sort of 6 absolute legendary speakers that have previously spoken on a remote Agile London. Their contribution has been fantastic. Each individual has done a fantastic talk before, drew some great questions from our audience, and just, you know, they've really been a great attribute to the sort of Agile London brand. So I wanted to pull them all together, create one event where you can listen to 6 speakers at 6 p.m. on the 6th of the month for 60 minutes, hence the Super 6. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to go straight into it. Now, the speakers have got 10 minutes each to speak, and due to the fact there's 6 speakers that will all probably draw pretty good questions from all of you, what we're going to do is, if each speaker has time within their 10-minute time slot and you have a question for them, I'm going to allow them their remaining time to answer any questions. So if at any point through a talk from either Ben, Nancy, John, Emma, Anik or Jana, please fire a question to me privately in the chat and I will ask that question to them within their 10-minute time slot. As I've said, I'm sure because I've got 6 speakers on and you are such an enthusiastic audience, I'm sure we'll have loads of questions and we could be here all night. But as I say, this is a quick fire event where I want you all to be able to hear from 6 great people within the Agile world within the space of 60 minutes. So we are going to kick off. So our speakers this evening, Ben Maynard, Nancy Bowman, John Spruce, Emma Hopkinson Spark, Anik Subban and Jana Lace. Up first is Ben Maynard, and his talk is Politics Matter, Why a Scrum Master Needs to be a Master of More Than Just Scrum. So Ben, over to you.
Thank you very much. So full disclosure, I'm at a client site. So if the cleaners come or my internet connection drops out, I apologize, I will be back. So I want to talk about a topic which I think is, I found quite fascinating when someone first said to me the Scrum Master role is an inherently political one. So I've been mulling that over and wondering, okay, so is it, how much of a master of politics should a Scrum Master be? And so I'm going to try and be brief and within 10 minutes talk about what I feel are the most salient points to this. So first of all, I'm going to talk about politics, what I mean by politics and why they matter. Why the role of Scrum Master is inherently political, and this is something I got from Boz Vodder, so the co-creator of Less. I want to look at some patterns, so I can help you understand some of the patterns when they're at play, and then look at what can we do to work with some of those. So try and give you as much useful stuff as possible. So I think there are many definitions of what politics really mean, and I think this is the one that I found most useful. And it's basically saying that when people use their power or social influence to achieve their own goals, when the officially sanctioned means and normal ways of going about things are unavailable or just undervalued. So basically when people want to sneak around in the background to achieve their own goals. So a lot of this really has to do with the status quo, not the band, but the kind of the status, the point at which we find most organizations. And changing the status quo is hard. As humans, we really like to maintain a certain level of stasis. If you may be familiar with the term homeostasis, which is our bodies keeping an equilibrium, it's how we maintain our temperature. It's how we kind of, how our bodies kind of exist as a lovely system. But organizations are the same, people are the same. And it's often said that whilst people don't mind change, they just dislike changing. So change is really hard, and when you're facing the status quo and you're a Scrum Master trying to change that, people will feel challenged. Their fight or flight mechanism will probably kick in because people see it as a threat. When you're coming in and you are challenging what people have built, that's going to make people scared. And then I believe it is that fear which starts people off on the whole destructive political activities. So I mentioned destructive political activities. Well, what are they? And really, what is politics when we look at it? Well, not all political activities are bad. Political activities which are actively working towards a shared organizational goal are useful. So if you're trying to work towards a shared goal and you're not using sanctioned means, and maybe you're going a bit off piste, but your intentions are good and you're having open group discussions and you are giving and receiving favors, if you're looking to build informal consensus, right? These are all really positive things. They help create a shared understanding and shared goals. And if we're assuming positive intent, if we believe that people are generally good and they're trying their best, then we embark upon activities which are quite beneficial from a political perspective. When it all starts to go awry is when we head upon destructive political activities. And these are activities which destroy meaning, and often through creating isolation and silos, we try to perhaps avoid conflict and destroy shared understanding. And this manifests as gossiping. You can see that I've left the standard boilerplate text now. I'll update that before I send out the real ones for you. But gossiping is a very destructive thing when you're talking about other people. When you factor into that things like exaggeration. One situation I had once with a head of engineering, he told me no teams have met their sprint forecast. And I said, well, that's very strange, because I've got the data and I can see that most teams exceeded their sprint forecast. So is that what you meant? He was like, oh, no, it isn't what I meant. No, I must have had the wrong information. But because of that exaggeration, or perhaps the lying that he was doing, the assuming of negative intent, people hooked onto that. And if people are feeling threatened and they see glimmers of things they can get behind to then further kind of discredit the people that are pushing the alternative view of things, they'll probably get behind it. So destructive political activities are dangerous. And there's the ones you see here, but there are others. So whenever we see people talking about others, hiding information, lying, gossiping, exaggeration, negative intent, these destroy activities to create shared understanding and shared meaning and work towards a collective goal. So why is the Scrum Master relevant to all of this? Right? And this is something that I really had to ponder about. Now, I kind of see the Scrum Master as having to do a number of things. And this may differ to your understanding, and grab me offline, get me through LinkedIn, and we can have a chat about this. So I'd love to hear people's opinions. But I really think the Scrum Master should effectively have a vision of creating compelling reasons for people to want to keep and support the whole, right? To actually make it, like, give people compelling reasons to want to use Scrum, to want to go on this change, not just be an agitator or a disruptor, but actually give people compelling reasons why I should get on this journey. The Scrum Master, as far as I can see, isn't there to just help the team. It's there to help the whole organization. It's about continuously developing a new organizational strategic direction when needed. Sometimes as a Scrum Master, you don't challenge things. You shouldn't challenge things. You do it over time, but ultimately you have to forget that an organization has a strategic direction, and the Scrum Master should help that to evolve and change when needed, and not just focus purely on the teams, have a much broader focus. And importantly, challenge the status quo, sharing observations, sharing their expertise, being recognized as the expert in all things Scrum and Agile is massively important for a Scrum Master. And I think this is what a Scrum Master should do. But when a Scrum Master does do these things, what we can end up with is fear. Right? We get fear because the status quo is being challenged. Right? And so we get fear in one aspect because we create transparency, and transparency can really suck for people, especially when it doesn't tell the same great story that they've been telling to other people. People often look to complain that they can't use Scrum, it doesn't fit their organization. Absolutely fine. It probably doesn't. That's kind of the point of it. Scrum isn't there to solve your problems. It's there to show you the problems and help you deal with them. And that's part of the role of a Scrum Master. This is an unpleasant transparency for people. And this creates a huge degree of fear. Fear is also created because of protection. Like when you're in an organization and you're working with, say, senior leaders or managers, whoever it may be, and their career and to certain extents their personalities are built in part because of that current state of the organization, the roles they've created for themselves and the way they've kind of gone up the organizational hierarchy. If you come in and challenge that, people will want to protect the status quo. it will make people fearful. Another element of fear, I've chosen various scary images as the background for this, is progress. If the organization is still rewarding or perceived to reward the old behaviors that don't align to the new way, people are going to be fearful of a new way because they think they're not going to get rewarded. This will impact your progress for any new approach that you're looking at. All this fear means people will go into the shadows. Right? They'll take strong offensive positions to try and actively work against creating a new shared understanding. They will attack or they will hide. But what this means when people disappear into the shadows, this is when we begin to see these destructive political activities come into play, because people don't want to face up to the conflict. They don't want to face up to the reality. So all of this fear and all the destructive political activities, there's a link. There's a link between these, because if people are fearful, they will by and large do this kind of stuff because they'll try and avoid it. They'll try and manipulate it. And they become very self-serving because they're trying to protect themselves and they are searching to achieve their own goals, and they will use unsanctioned and perhaps unethical means in which to do that. So what patterns can we see in organizations, and what gives us a smell of this? One is public indifference. If you're working with people and somebody isn't actively for the idea or the change, I say they're not publicly agreeing to something, there's more of a problem than disagreeing. If they're disagreeing, they're happy to have the conflict, you can work through it. If they're not publicly disagreeing, there's public indifference, which will probably mean that there's private dissent. That behind closed doors, they are moaning and they are complaining, they're exaggerating, and they're trying to manipulate things to an extent because they don't want to face up to the conflict. And when there are no conversations happening around it, then, and you as a Scrum Master, you're not going through and having those conversations, you can't solve a problem if you don't know what the problem is. So when you see all these kind of things happening, they're great indicators that there's some dirty, destructive political activities happening in the background. So what can we do? There are people out there who won't want to change, right? And if they say, I won't, then you can't help people who say they don't want to change. They don't see your solutions, they reject transparency, they don't want to seek transparency because they don't see there's any problems. There's not a lot you can do with people who say, I won't. The people that say, I can't, is a great coaching opportunity. They can't, but maybe they want to. What are the obstacles that are in the way? So being a Scrum Master or a coach and helping people challenge themselves and overcome those problems is a great way to approach it. Also, choosing carefully what transparency you create and when is a fantastic tool to have in your toolbox. So knowing where to skillfully select what to bring up and who to bring it up in front of, is a great way to highlight the fact that there is a lack of shared understanding. And if all else fails and it's not working, get another job. Like sometimes knowing when it's enough and when to quit is the ethical and professional thing to do. And it may be hard, but sometimes the hardest decisions are the most valuable ones. I'm slightly over my time limit. So I would just say thank you for listening. Unfortunately, I've got to go and get on a train now. So if you've got any questions, I'll do my best to, if you can pass it on to me, Alex, I will respond over LinkedIn or email. This is my contact details. I hope you enjoy the rest of the fantastic speakers, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon.
And thank you very much. That was a fantastic talk. Thank you for that. Safe travels. And as Ben touched on at the end, if you are looking for a new job, I know a really good recruitment agency. So feel free to reach out. Okay, next up, we've got
that was not the plan. That was not part of the deal, man. You
Hey, we're collaborating, Ben. Next up, we've got Nancy Bowman, and her talk is on remote working has killed the fun in Scrum. Nancy, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks for the intro, and hi, everyone. So first of all, that statement is not my personal statement. However, that statement did lead me to do some more digging into how we can foster better relationships in Scrum teams, especially in today's climate. So I think it's also worth mentioning when I work with teams, I tend to focus a lot on the interpersonal relationships that people have, because I think that is really what drives and fuels everything else. And I will go ahead and share my screen. So I hope you can all see that. Awesome. So So we're here to talk about remote working has killed the fun in Scrum. So this was a statement that was shared with me at the very start of lockdown, and it kind of put me into a spiral of panic because my instant knee-jerk reaction was, how can we make Scrum more fun? And in particular, how can we make it more fun within a remote setting? And if I'm honest, just like many of my other peer groups who I connected with, we instantly started to channel our energy to making Scrum events fun. And we instantly thought, okay, what's the quickest and most efficient, easy solution that we can think of while under pressure to make these events fun? So we started to come up with ideas like turning retrospective meetings into virtual pubs. And yes, those were really fun, as you can imagine. But after a couple of weeks, you get a bit bored of that. And then we started to turn daily stand-ups into the Breakfast Club. And yes, those were also great, but then after a period of time, you got bored of that. So I guess while I think that all of these efforts behind these type of initiatives are great, they do distract us from the big elephant in the room as to why people say statements like, this situation is killing the fun in Scrum. The elephant in the room is that we have overnight been essentially pushed into a situation where we are all in long distance relationships. And that by itself comes with challenges and complications, misunderstandings. And you're probably wondering, why does it even matter? And why are you tying this back to long distance relationships? Now, for me, as a Scrum Master and Agile coach, relationships that we have amongst each other within teams is literally what fuels everything we do. And at the moment, we're at a situation where that core, that relationship part is gradually deteriorating, especially if we purely focus on the superficial things. So making sure that things are scheduled and we have artifacts, but if the relationships at the core aren't great, unfortunately, it doesn't matter how many Zoom parties you throw, it won't necessarily solve this complicated and sticky human problem that we have. So what can we do? Because you're probably wondering, I'm a Scrum Master, Agile coach, etc., project manager, but I'm not a certified relationship coach. So in the next few slides, I will share my thoughts / ideas on how I think that we can foster better relationships in the working environment, and in particular within remote working in Scrum teams or Kanban teams. So the first step is, I think we need to reframe the problem. So by reframing the question, we accept that the current environment is what it is, and instead of working against it, we try and use it and turn it into an opportunity. So the question that I started asking myself was, how can or how might we use remote working to foster better and high quality relationships amongst teams? So I think by me acknowledging that that was the setting of the situation, was that I wasn't working against trying to get rid of remote working, but I really started to look at what opportunities that comes along with remote working that we probably wouldn't get if we were to work in the office space. So what I started to notice was that remote working actually creates a really awesome opportunity for little chats to be held. Because quite often when we see each other, let's say when we try and replicate the in-person working into remote working, all we're thinking about is replicating all of the Scrum events. And these are really big chats because we're talking about work, we're talking about deadlines, but what we're missing is the little chats. So what we started to do is introduce random coffee moments during sprints for team members to reconnect on a personal level. And the only rule of thumb was, if you want to talk about work, talk about it, but likely please avoid talking about work and talk about everything else that's happening for you. Another thing we started to do was to distinguish that checking in on someone versus checking up on them are two different things. when you check in on someone, it's really about creating that genuine moment where you're checking in with people and you're checking in how they're doing as humans. And you're really not trying to check about the work. When you're checking up on something, it could be checking up on a piece of work. And quite often, as you can imagine, because we're not seeing each other, we're missing body language, tone of voice. We're missing a lot of moments where we're actually trying to, coming back to like being able to assume positive intent virtually is very difficult. So I think by us kind of fostering and creating this environment where we genuinely check in on the people behind the screens. And one of the things that we started to do here was genuinely actually not relying less on Zoom and picking up the phone and calling people, or having WhatsApp video chats. And yes, you want to have consent before you call your colleagues on WhatsApp, because Lord knows they might be dealing with the cats or kids. But it was just kind of breaking the ice a bit, and really getting to know each other on a personal level. So what do you do when you then find out stuff about your colleagues in your teams, and how can you kind of acknowledge their situation? So one of the things that I started to kind of coach people on within the teams was showing random act of kindness. And this was really evident when COVID had really kind of hit its peak, and there were team members struggling with living by themselves, because I had a team member who lived by themselves in the countryside, and they were dealing with some immense amount of loneliness. So it was just showing something really small. So we found out their favorite donut brand, and we sent that over to them. And I'm not trying to encourage that we should open up our wallets and send gifts to people, but if that's what you want, no judgment here. But it's just about thinking, again, who the person on the other side, what is a random act of kindness that I can show them, just to kind of highlight that I'm here for them, especially when sometimes you can get knee deep into the sprints and deadlines can take over. People are often forgotten sometimes. So essentially what it is I'm trying to say with this talk at this moment is that while we're in a remote environment, we really want to focus on cherishing the people on the other side of the line through our actions and our words, really to highlight one thing, and that is that you genuinely care about where they're at, what they need, and if they have any problems that you can perhaps support them on. So I guess that's it for now. Thank you so much for tuning in. I don't know how much time I've got left over, but thank you.
Fantastic, Nancy. If you do want to continue, you've got 2 minutes and 20 seconds. But if you're done, we can absolutely jump to John. It's up to you. You done?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so next up, thank you very much, Nancy. Fantastic talk. We've got John Spruce. His talk is Remote Retrospectives, 6 tips for engaging reflection. John, over to you.
Great stuff. Standard check, really. Can you all hear me? Yeah, thumbs up.
Good.
That's all good for me. Right, I'm just going to bring up a slide deck to go through, to have a little bit of a chat through today. So my name is John. I'm an Agile coach and trainer. I'm just going to set my own time box, so I tend to talk quite a lot, so I'll run over if I don't do that. So I'm going to keep on going with this now. I'm from Agile Center. We deliver training and coaching, and part of the stuff I wanted to talk about here is, again, the opportunity that this COVID pandemic has offered is that a lot of digital disruptions happening across the world. A lot of people are working remotely and working from home. And I think there's this kind of notion that you just have to carry on doing the same things you've always done, to try and do the work that you're doing in Scrum. So for example, retrospectives is one of the big things that I tend to do first with a team and an organization I work with. And so we're doing more and more of these, but actually the remote side of things presents some challenges, to be perfectly honest with you. So I'm going to take you through some bits and pieces here, some stuff you may already kind of know and be aware of, but others, hopefully we'll get some shared tips in here. Can everyone see my screen? Standard thing again. I might just need a nod. All right, good. So safety is the first thing that we want to talk about. I think it was just a little bit of a conversation there about how people feel. We should always start with the prime directive of retrospectives, really, is that we come from a place of initial safety by letting people know that what we're actually discovering here is about how to improve the ways of working, how to improve the work we do. And it's not about blame, and it's not about the work that has been achieved is problematic. It's more about how we solve the issues that are around them necessarily. So we want to make sure that people understand this, and it's a good place to begin. So it came from a handbook for team review by Norm Kurth. And regardless of what we discover, we understand and truly believe that everyone did the best job they could, given what they knew at the time, their skills and abilities and resources available, and the situation at hand. So this is that we go with the best intent to begin with. And everyone has that kind of in mind. It means that we cannot be looking at a place where it's blame and there's a real problem. Some of the kind of things to look in as well is checking safety with the team before even progressing with the retro. I'll go through a couple of safety checkpoints in a second, but what this means is, are people willing to share? Now in person, you can read a lot more in body language. You can get a temperature for the room by looking at how people are interacting. But when you're remote and people are behind a camera, or even with the cameras off, you end up finding that there's not a huge amount that you can pick up tacitly in the room with people. And so checking safety is important to make sure that people do feel that they can share openly and honestly. Start with the prime directive, as I just went through there. Involve everyone. So a retro is really important to get everybody's point of view and everybody's kind of comments, because what's important to each individual is as important to the group as a whole. Cameras here is a question mark, because some people don't feel safe in their own right to have the camera on all the time. I'd always encourage to allow cameras to be on for retrospectives and exercises, definitely, but I think the key thing here is not assuming that and not forcing people. So talking to them around their kind of individual safety and how they feel in that environment is really important. So not always having to force it, but I think it's always encouraged to make sure you can see people's faces and communicate with each other, definitely as a team. Keep notes on who is and isn't speaking. If you're facilitating a retrospective remotely, it's always good just to keep a quick tally of who's talking a lot, who's discussing a lot, and who's in the shadows and who's sort of leaned out. Main reason being is that some people are a little bit more talkative, a bit like myself. Some people a little bit less so. And actually what you find is that people who are fearful for speaking out probably have some very good insight into what should be done in the retro, and actually helping to unpick that is really helpful. So time boxing people, that's really helpful. Driving the conversation around the room if you need to is also helpful as well, to pull people into the conversation. So ensuring that people are there, and also being mindful of that introvert, extrovert kind of approach that people may have, and that the way that they feel is really important. From a safety check perspective, it can be really easy. It's like an anonymous safety check that you can put in with the team. Here's a quick example here. And you just ask, on a scale of 1 to 5, how safe do you feel within this retrospective? And this is kind of an important point, really, because A, I'm feeling very safe. Let's talk about everything and just crack on and do a normal, decent retrospective. Actually, here's another one, which is feeling moderately safe, and I'll participate with their limits. If you have anybody saying they're not safe, I do not feel safe and I'm extremely uncomfortable, you kind of have to abandon the retro and follow up with the individuals. Now, this gives you some good guidance here on what to look for. But I suppose the really interesting thing is that people don't necessarily start off from a sense of safety. If you're going to go in as a Scrum Master, be very cognizant of the team. So don't just assume everyone's going to really just muck in and get really honest and open about the way of working and how they can improve. Try and get this. This can be done anonymously. You can use a Google form if you wanted to. With it being remote, you can use post-it notes on a mural board or whatever, but I think it's really important to get a sense of safety in the room so that actually when you go into the retro, you can be priming them for much more interactive, engaging kind of system. Logistics, I think it's an important thing, but it's often kind of forgotten about, really. Set up your space really well. You know, consider a decent microphone, consider a decent quality camera, make sure you have some good lighting, good internet connection, potentially multiple screens if you're facilitating, but also help support the teams to have the same kind of stuff as well. Making sure there's enough infrastructure in place for teams to work remotely is really important, as well as ensuring that they can actually engage in this properly. I have a retrospectives where people are dialing in on Zoom from the car. It's not really going to be a very engaging situation, but be cognizant of the different setups. So I think it's important to make sure you have space personally for this, but also you're encouraging your team to make sure they've got a decent space to work as well, and supporting that as well. Obviously, the tools that you use would be different. We tend to use Zoom a lot, or Microsoft Teams, depending on the client. We also use Miro or Mural and Jira, or Trello or similar kind of boards. So you've got, you know, the top row there is about the video conferencing enabler. You have the second row, which is kind of collaborative working tools that you can use for whiteboarding and capturing different cards, etc., and running lots of them. A lot of these tools already have baked in templates for retrospectives, etc., as well. And Jira or Trello, the reason I put them in there really is the capturing of the actions out the other side of a retrospective. Quite often you actually have a retro and it becomes very cathartic and everyone kind of talks about what's going wrong, but no action's taken. And that's a big anti-pattern to look out for, because it becomes really kind of nonsensical. There's no point in having a retro if no action's taken. And so you want to make sure that you have somewhere to capture that alongside the other items of your sprint backlog, if you're working in Scrum, for example, so you can actually have a card there, which is a retrospective action, and it's giving the priority the same as your product work. So making sure you've got the tools, the team are familiar with the tools, you've briefed them and trained them on those tools as well, and that you're familiar with them as well, is really important. Because I think that you're not assuming everyone knows how to use the voting mechanism in Mural, or they don't know how to put their hands up in Zoom. It's important to sort of take them through that and take on board some of that sort of Scrum Master as a teacher kind of stance, and help people with those issues they may have. We're doing the same thing with some of our clients around access to different tools, because they don't currently have access to the collaboration tools, or everyone's forced to work from home. So there's an interesting dynamic there. You have to sort of support them in how to move forward. Structure of the actual retro itself. You can use any type of retro that you would use in the office normally, but I would always try and keep it simple. Leverage the technology you have already. Mix up the retros. So, you know, as we were talking before there, a previous talk about, you know, coffee mornings, or having a pub kind of thing in the evenings, whatever. Mix it up a bit, because people get bored quite quickly with this stuff and it becomes very repeatable, very difficult. But real thing here is to focus on the outcomes. Tasty Cupcakes is a website. You can get loads of different kind of retrospective ideas there. But really they kind of break down into a few different types. Either you want to encourage your team to think about action, what do you want to start doing, what do you want to stop doing, what do you want to continue doing. Teams that need practice on their thinking, maybe sort of what are we doing, so what, why is that a problem, and now what do we do? They're asking similar questions but driving them towards a very similar kind of outcome. And then like, loathe, long for, learns, a 4L grid is a good option there. Great for much bigger kind of reflection, and as well as an individual level. So what we're looking for here is to say, actually, how do we feel about things rather than just the action itself? And these things are really important to make sure that we capture as much of these as possible and come out the other side of it with clear actions. Review the retro, of course, make sure there's room for open discussion. So, you know, silent writing of the post-it notes, put them on the wall, and the Scrum Master talking at the group through each of the cards is not what we want to really sort of enable here. What we want is the Scrum Master to facilitate the discussion within the group themselves. So they talk through their own cards, try not to justify or explain away different things, have a clear, open discussion if everyone's safe. And once you actually have that, then dot voting on the individual ones for action is really important, because that actually helps you crowdsource what the team want to move forward with as well. So giving clear review time for open discussion is really important, but don't talk for the team. And don't let one person talk over everybody else. Time box each of the different cards. Really important point, you need to make sure that people feel safe by allowing them to have their own voice. Take action. Of course, it's an important thing here. The purpose of the retrospective is to take action on improvement, really, or a Kaizen. I've started, so I'll finish. I've got another couple of slides and I'll finish, honestly, Alex, it's fine. Ensure that there's at least one thing that the team can take into the next sprint to improve. And these Kaizen actions should actually be treated as first-class citizens in the sprint backlog. So what this means is that you don't just leave it on the sticky note on the wall in the retro room. Thanks very much, everyone. It was really good retrospective. Go team, see you next 2 weeks. It's important to take that card, put it into the actual backlog. So put it into Jira, put it into Trello, put it into something that you can work with, and support the product owner, because the product owner may not know and may not understand the value of these improvement actions about sharpening the axe, about improving the team, about Kaizen. And so actually they just want to have everything in the backlog of new product features. They may need support, coaching, and training on understanding that for every one thing that's in the backlog of improvement, you're going to help improve the overall team as well. So it's important to help support that. And finally, I'm going to go meta, retro the retro itself. Ensure that you've actually managed to retrospect on the retrospective approach. Get an understanding from the people in the room, use fist of 5 or a temperature check, 3 out of 5, 4 out of 5, whatever it might be, to ensure that people can see, actually, this was a good retrospective. We did find out it was really helpful. Actually, we need to improve this. It didn't work very well. We didn't have enough time for discussion, etc., etc. But don't take things personally. It is the prime directive that everyone's doing the best they can with the knowledge they have at the time, and take action yourself. So improve the retro for next time to ensure that people get some actual value out of it. That's me. Thank you very much. I am slightly over on time, so apologies for that. I'm making up some of the time that was left before, I suppose. There are my contact details. If you do want to contact me after this, connect on LinkedIn if we're not already there, and we can have a further discussion offline if needed. Thank you for your time. Stop sharing.
John, thank you very much indeed. Do reach out to John and the other guys at Agile Centre. They run some fantastic training courses as well. So if you are looking for further training, absolutely reach out. John, a quick question, which I've been asked. Did you choose the 6 tips to align with Super 6?
I did, yeah. 6 tips for 6 retros on 6th of the 6th at 6 p.m. Yes. Yeah, I did that.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Works well. Okay, now we've got Emma Hopkinson Spark up talking with us. Emma's spoken before, did a fantastic talk before, so I'm absolutely confident it'll be equally as good again. Emma's talk is Why All the Meetings? Emma, over to you.
I can find the mute button. Hey, so I haven't got slides, I'm afraid. So you've just got my mug for the next 8 to 10 minutes or so. If you want to stick it onto Speaker View or something, it might be a little bit easier. But hey, so last year, our team at 101 Ways started complaining that they were spending too much time in meetings. And I'm sure we've probably all had that feeling at some point. And it's actually a really common complaint for Scrum teams when they start out. There's always that sense of, I spend too much time in a meeting and not enough time doing stuff. Years ago, I remember I had a client who had the same complaint in their business, but what they had done about it, pre me helping them, I should say, was to enforce a rule of no meetings without an agenda, which had to be in, they'd designed a form that you had to fill in that had the agenda for it, and that had to be filled out and sent around all of the attendees with a minimum notice period so everyone could consume it, feedback on it. And then at the end of every meeting, they wanted a few minutes for everyone to fill in a feedback form about how the meeting had gone and how it had met the objectives that they'd set out and how they'd, whether it had actually met the originally stated agenda. So then, of course, they needed to add in a review meeting where once a week they would sit down and go through all of the feedback forms that they'd had on the meetings that week so that they could decide whether these meetings were working or not and which ones they ought to refine and which they needed to change. So basically, they had tackled the problem of too many meetings by adding in extra meetings with the bonus of extra paperwork and process over the top of it. True story, and I'm not going to tell you who it was. There you go. So for those of you that don't know me already, I am Emma, I'm Chief of Staff at 101 Ways, and I lead the practice there for coaching and transformation with our client engagements. So this is a problem I have seen many times, and I know from experience, as I've just explained, how not to handle that situation when people tell you they're in too many meetings. So what I decided to do was that I really wanted to understand what was going on. So are there really too many unnecessary meetings that are happening? Or did we actually need all of that stuff, but we were failing somehow to get the value out of it for everybody? Now, the conclusion that I came to when I did all of the investigation work and looked at what we were doing was that actually it was a combination of both. And what I've managed to see is that I've identified 5 reasons why you ever need a meeting. And unsurprisingly, they correlate pretty directly to all of the regular meetings and events that you're used to working with a Scrum team anyway. So what I'm going to talk about now for the next few minutes is a quick rundown of what each of those meeting types really are. And we're already used to the concept of focusing a team on purpose around product development, but on focusing on the why of something as small as a quick meeting or a conversation, you will help make all of your comms more effective. So, number 1, information sharing. So I have facts or knowledge that you need, or you have some facts or knowledge that I need to know. And how often, though, have you been in a meeting and then been talked at for about an hour and then left the room thinking that could have been an email? Well, that was an information sharing meeting, no doubt. And that's how I would categorize that one. Number 2 is tactical collaboration. So actually, how are we going to work together now to achieve a goal, to solve a problem, or to get something done? Before I move on to the others, it's worth saying that this is one of the most common dysfunctions that I see in a Scrum team, is when the daily stand-ups have become about information sharing rather than tactical collaboration. In fact, it's a really good example as well of why having an agenda isn't the answer to having a productive meeting. So you could think of that quick 3-question format for a stand-up as having an agenda. So you know how long this meeting's going to take, you know who's going to speak, and you know all the talking points that are going to run through for each person. But how often have you been to a stand-up that goes something like, yesterday I worked on Jira 24657 and I checked in the code for that bug, and I paired with Fred, and I had 3 meetings with product, and today I'm going to pick up something else, no blockers. Now, that to me is just not valuable. The point of that daily 10 or 15 minutes that you've got together is to agree as a team how you're going to work together in the coming day to achieve the goal that you've given yourselves. Okay, so number 3 is planning. So this is now just looking that little bit ahead. Is the path clear? Are we able to do what we need to do next? So it's not like months and months of release planning. It's just that little look ahead to say, do we know where we're going? Is it okay? Can we clear a path for it? Number 4 is alignment. So this is that rallying cry of getting everybody bought into a goal and a vision, and making sure that they're able to then pull together and figure out how they're going to get there. It's worth pointing out here the difference between getting alignment and back to information sharing. Telling people a goal that you have decided is not the same as getting buy-in, and it's certainly not guaranteed to motivate a team to any sense of collective ownership around delivering against that goal. Number 5 is improvement, which is just what John's been talking about. So this is your retrospectives reflected in Scrum. And at some point, you really do need to pause, take stock of how things are going, and then make some adjustments in order to make sure that you are still making things better. So I started off by saying that our teams were feeling that there were too many meetings. And what I found was that actually there were an awful lot of information sharing meetings going on, some of which were duplication as well. So I had people that were in this group, and we're taking the same information in lots of different ways in lots of different places. There were also meetings which we knew we needed, but it just didn't feel like they were as valuable as we should be. And using this categorization of the way that we were having our meetings really helped make clear that in those cases, there was actually some confusion about the purpose, or there was a mismatch of expectation versus reality in it. Like the example of that stand-up, which at its best is about tactical collaboration, but can often become more about information sharing. If half the team think that it's one thing, but the rest think it's something else, then it won't be long before some frustration starts to show in the way that you're actually working together. And the difference here really comes down to intent. You need people to understand the intent for any meeting that you're having. And that's not the same as having an agenda. The measure of success is not how well you stick to a plan. And we know that that's true of whether you're dealing with product development or whether you're actually having trying to get a valuable conversation or a productive meeting done. The best way then to clearly communicate your intent is to state it explicitly. So now when we're having meetings, we are explicit about the purpose for it. This meeting is about alignment. We're going to talk about our future goals, and we're going to make sure that everybody is bought into getting there. This meeting is information sharing. There's just a lot of stuff going on right now. Let's get everybody's thoughts out in the open and deal with it from there. So I'm going to wrap up, because this is a short one, you get all your time back, by saying that actually all of the meetings that you need, and I did a lot of thinking on this, I'm a big overthinker, all of the meetings that you can possibly need, and all of the meetings that happen already in the course of working with Scrum, can be summed up into one of those 5 whys, actually, which is information sharing, tactical collaboration, planning, alignment, or improvement. So be explicit with people about which one your meeting is really about. And if and when you start to see those regular meetings becoming less effective, check back in on that. Is the purpose right? Is it trying to be lots of those things all mashed together and leaving people confused about what value they're actually getting out of that session? If you want your conversations to be valuable and worthwhile, you don't need an agenda, you just need a why. And that I will hand back to Alex.
Emma, thank you very much. Been meaning to ask, actually, how's the new puppy?
I went on mute far too early. She nearly came with me. So my husband got home just in time to have her in the house. So yes, I have a 9-week-old cockapoo and she's utterly adorable. She spent most of the day here with me and done lots of meetings. She almost joined me, but I just managed to dump her on the husband instead.
Good move, good move. Thank you very much for your talk. Excellent, and within the time. So thanks, Emma. Thank you very much. Okay, so we next have Anik Subhan, who has also spoken with us before, another fantastic talk. And Anik's talk is the 6 hats a Scrum Master wears. Anik, over to you.
Thanks, Alex, and yeah, thanks to all the other speakers so far. It's been great to hear some of those insights, and yeah, thanks for everyone for joining as well. I just need to give a quick shout out before I start to Christopher Phillips, because I think early on I caught a glimpse of a fellow Liverpool fan in the background there, just giving him a high five. So good to see some other fellow Premier League champions there. Alex, I don't know why you got your hand in your head. What's wrong?
Anik, I'm a Man United fan.
All right, well,
we've waited long enough.
Exactly, yeah.
It's about bloody time we got our turn.
Exactly, it's definitely our turn now. But let's move swiftly on then before me and Alex have much more of a debate on that.
Yeah, I can still remove you from this chat, by the way.
Okay, touche. All right. So on to the 6 hats then that a Scrum Master wears. And I really want to say that I chose 6 also because of the Super 6, but actually I didn't. And you know what? It was meant to be. So I'm glad that worked out really well. So Scrum Master, as we've heard, and as a lot of us are aware, it's a crucial role within a team. It's a glue. It's the thing that's holding the team together, especially in those early stages of a team's forming phase. And the thing about Scrum Master is, they're constantly switching, between many hats, lots and lots of different hats. And I'm just going to talk through what I feel are the 6 kind of key ones, and the 6 kind of main ones. And for me, they are being a leader, being a teacher, being a coach, mentor, facilitator, and quality guardian as well. So let me just step through each of those just briefly. So as a leader, Scrum Master is very much a servant leader. Within Scrum, we're all kind of clear on what that is and what that means, and that is them kind of doing what's required to make their team successful. They're helping to remove blockers, they're helping to address key challenges and clear a path forward for a smooth delivery by that team. They're also providing the core leadership that's required then for that team to move forward. And this includes bringing all the disciplines together and all the roles that are within that team. So, it covers developers, analysts, designers, QAs, all the kind of, different roles that make up that cross-functional team. So the second hat then is teacher or trainer. A Scrum Master is often acting as a part-time teacher or trainer for the team and also the wider organization. In the early days of a team, they may need a little bit more guidance, a little bit more reiterating some of the stuff that they may have been taught from the Scrum guide, for example. Maybe it's other principles, but especially as they're learning the foundations as a team are new and working together in a new phase, that reinforcement is absolutely key. Later on in that journey, the rest of the organization then may need more of that teaching and that support and that training on Scrum and Agile. The Scrum Masters are looked at, as experts and as people who, are the go-to people, for anything related to Scrum and Agile. And so being experts in the field mean that, as that team matures, it becomes a little bit less teaching and a little bit more coaching, which takes us nicely onto the next hat. So as a coach, as a Scrum Master, they may be seen as a coach. They're often seen as a coach for the team. Scrum Master can use various coaching techniques and methods to help, that team improve and become self-sufficient as well. The aim or a goal, of a Scrum Master, one of the goals is to ensure that the team are not heavily reliant on them and that they're able to function day to day largely by themselves, becoming more self-sufficient, becoming more self-organizing. The coaching role there that a Scrum Master can play really helps to spur that team forward and to continuously improve through small actions and small iterations. Using that coaching technique helps that team to learn by doing and giving them that safe space, or creating that safe space for them to learn and learn from their mistakes as well as learn from their successes, to make sure that they're able to adapt and operate as a self-organizing team further down the line. Number 4 then out of the 6 is mentor. So a Scrum Master, has experience with Scrum. They've got experience with coordinating and facilitating teams. This experience is absolutely vital. It's so important. Looking after the delivery from teams gives them this valuable experience that can help mentor more junior or potentially less experienced members of the team. There may be team members that are very new, to Agile, who can also benefit from that mentoring from a Scrum Master. Murray, just to let you know, I'm not doing slides, just to confirm, just so you know. So I'm just talking off the cuff. They'll be providing that guidance and direction on areas where they've learnt, from in the past, and how to progress their, the careers or their roles as well. That mentorship is absolutely key for people that are new to some of those aspects of Agile and Scrum as well. Number 5 then out of the 6 hats is facilitator. So facilitation is for me one of the most important aspects of the Scrum Master role. They ensure as a Scrum Master that the right conversations are happening between the right people at the right time. It's a fine art. It's a skill that can absolutely be learned through practice. And when facilitated well, a team can really accelerate their continuous improvement, cutting through the noise and getting to a validated and successful end product at the end of that journey. And facilitation here is not, as it can be interpreted quite widely, it's not just within the Scrum events, it's between and around each of those events too. It's the ad hoc discussions that take place within the team that can help teams make well thought through and rapid decisions. For example, back when I was a Scrum Master at Sky a few years ago, I was helping to make sure that our team was becoming as cross-functional as possible. So that meant enabling, a smooth delivery by bringing in some of the UX and UI designers into the conversations and into the team as well. So actually sitting with the team, pairing with developers, working on emerging the design, emerging the product, together. And also vice versa, bringing the developers into some of those design feedback sessions too, because what that helped was them to be able to collaborate quite closely and have some of those decision-making conversations collectively. And with that key facilitation, what that does, it unites that team as one delivery unit as well. So then number 6, then the final kind of hat out of these 6 is quality guardian. So Scrum Master is the one that upholds those standards, the principles and the ways of working for the team. They're shielding, they are protecting the team from unnecessary pressures and any unnecessary pressure and noise. When shielded, then that team can deliver to the best of their ability. But if they're under pressure, or not necessarily under pressure, but under unnecessary pressure that's not always required in terms of getting through to the team, then they may be tempted to cut corners and succumb to potentially made up deadlines, which I'm sure some of us have experienced. So those are the 6 kind of key hats. So in summary, that was leader, teacher, coach, mentor, facilitator, and quality guardian. So there's lots of hats, like I mentioned, that Scrum Master wears, switching between them all the time. And these 6, like I mentioned, they're just a snippet of them. And as I'm sure you will come across, different flavors of Scrum Mastery and different hats in your time. Key takeaway for me for this is that as a Scrum Master, you need to try and know and be aware of which role to actively use in different circumstances. What that helps you to do is then maximize the productivity and the effectiveness and capabilities of your team. And it also helps to become more aware of which hat you sometimes subconsciously switch into and learn as well. So that you can figure out, is that the best approach? Do I need to switch into something else for this particular scenario? Scrum Master, absolutely vital, multifunctional, and core role to any delivery team, which can't be underestimated, but also one that has lots of different details within that role under the hood. And that's me.
Andy, thank you very much indeed. Really enjoyed that one, despite the shaky start about our football team. It pains me to say, but congratulations. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you very much. And to close off the Super 6 event for us tonight is Jana. Again, it's also spoken before with fantastic talk. And Jana's talk tonight is top 3 Scrum Master techniques. Jana, over to you.
All right. Hey, guys. So I will have slides. Don't stress. I'm one of those people. They're more visual prompts. You get a copy at the end. It'll have extra tips and tricks for you. So I'm going to share my screen and start my timer. And let's get ready. Obviously not 6. I'm doing 3. I was last. Had to cut it in half. We are where we are. So let's get ready and off we are. So the 3 key tips, I just want to talk first about actually the word technique. And the reason being is there's 2 meanings. And as a Scrum Master, I realized something when I started my journey, because I started my journey as in Scrum and became a Scrum Master. And it was kind of like Harry Potter. Overnight, I had moved from my project management job with a client and was told I'm a Scrum Master. And it was almost like being Harry Potter. It was like, Harry, you're a wizard. And in my head, I'm like, okay, what the crap does that mean? And I just want to explain the 2 meanings, because at both times you could be a Harry Potter. Congratulations, you've started your journey and you've been mapped as a Scrum Master. Or it's a technique, you've wanted it, it's a goal, you've worked hard and you've refined it, in which, using Harry Potter again, this is kind of like the Neville Longbottom story. This is where we use the meaning of technique to do something until we are able to do it practically. Taking that skill and refining it. We might not start amazing. We might not be Harry Potter, magical powers. But at the end of the day, a technique is a technique. It is how we wield the power. We use our skills. And as Scrum Masters, these techniques are a tool belt in which we use. So following the theme of funders, we're going to continue on with the 3. So what are the 3 I'm talking about? Storytelling. If you're a Scrum Master that needs to achieve mastery, you are the hero in your journey, being your career journey, and leading that team through each sprint, through each battle, through to each goalpost, to get your team to win, to get the outcome. To do that, you must use storytelling, your stories, use personal stories that you've got about the team. Use everything to bring it alive. And before, as I were talking about, you don't want meetings for meetings, to share information for the sake of sharing information. As humans, over time, we share information best through storytelling. 2, swarming. Not only do animals and fish do this, it's a fantastic pattern as a Scrum Master. It allows you to pull a lever and to get an outcome, to reduce WIP, and enable the team to start achieving, especially when something is blocked. Number 3 that we're going to talk about is my patented super copy top secret technique, and I call that stopping the zombie apocalypse. So if you haven't fallen asleep by the time my 8 minutes is done, we get to talk about number 3, which is the super secret Scrum Master formula, stopping the zombie apocalypse. So let's get started. Number 1, of all the storytelling techniques, especially with the up and coming of design thinking, it is overwhelming. If I have to hear one more person going, storytelling for effective leadership, what does that mean? And I am going to give you that secret tip. If you are going to tell a story, if you are going to lead through storytelling, it must be authentic. You have to show up as the Scrum Master, being your authentic self. Put your flavor into your talks. Don't follow a rigid model if it's not going to complement your style. Your job is to be the master of Scrum, to work with the team, removing blockers, and to get them performing quickly. Your style is going to work best if you're a good Scrum Master because your Scrum team knows you, they've worked with you. Vice versa, if you're joining a new team, make your stories personal. Find little bits of information about the team member. You saw Alex do it before, referencing Emma's dog. These things make it personal, it makes it inclusive, and it adds a bit of life to what would effectively be a bunch of information in a talk with a framework, giving it to the team with some requirements. We do some stuff, lots of meetings, hopefully less. We get some output of value, we get the feedback, and around we go. Very mechanical. You as a Scrum Master bring this greatness to life. It's about creating purpose, and it is greater than your team. As Ben mentioned before, it's about taking everyone on a journey, but it's about the organization, not just you and your little world. Make it visual. However, using visual language, we are remote right now. Where we can, make it visual. Where we can't, use visual words. What do I mean by that? Use things like, today the sun is so shining and it's amazing. Let's take that amazing energy, put it into our Scrum team and discover new outputs. I don't know. However it works for you. Other people like to theme their Scrum teams. This is where we see team names, and then we start seeing little characters in Jira or any other tool. And this is where we see things like League of Legends, Pokemon, anything. So make it visual, make your story personal, and create the context around which your team's going to support. They're going to support you, the product, the customer, and the whole value and flow. Lastly, put surprises. When we are teaching as Scrum Masters, we are both being a Scrum Master, mastering to uphold the framework in Scrum with our team, but we're also trying to get our team to go quickly. And so expect surprises and put those surprises in your own storytelling to refer back to your team when you are reminding them of maybe a new pattern, maybe it's the overrunning daily stand-up. Throw in some surprises of some stories where maybe they haven't expected or seen that. Throw a surprise in that it doesn't have to always be this rigid way of doing things. Put a fist of 5 in there. You can come up with ways, but most importantly, have value. Find the value. And one last little one on storytelling. Omit any irrelevant detail that doesn't add value to the conversation. If you're not getting value from what I'm telling you to get my point across, admit it from your own storytelling, and keep it high level, because the higher the level allows people to put their own labels, put their own context and meaning, and you'll have higher acceptability, especially when we're looking at techniques that might not be working in the Scrum framework. Maybe we're pulling out the stand-up. Don't go into too much detail, keep it high level and play it back to them. 2, swarming, kind of two sides of the coin here. On one side, we have Jess Sutherland, who is just a link from his talk about swarming your way to done. If everything is in progress, you are now individualizing from the product backlog item. Scrum Masters, keep an eye on this. Keep an eye on the flow of value. Keep an eye on the future, on the sprint. Understand the patterns that your team has and recognize when to swarm before everything is in progress where possible. Whether this be WIP limits, using rule of thumb, making sure that the team trying out new ways of working with each other to make sure not everyone's got their own little story. But most importantly, remember it's about achieving the goal. One way you'll find when swarming is more necessary for things that aren't unseen, tech debt, maybe there's a Sev 1. I'm talking about you've done a clear planning, refinement, you've started your sprint, and all of a sudden everything is in progress. You're already past week 1. What's going to get closed? There's a bad smell already by that point, and that is, how did we get from talking about a goal or an output in Scrum all the way across to everything in progress and nothing achieved? Swarming is that technique. It becomes natural for the team. Help coach your team into this. And how could swarming be used to maximize flow of value? Focus on one piece of flow. Is your product increment that you're building, that piece, that output, that value, a single piece of flow, or did we build other pieces of work streams into that unconsciously or subconsciously? We didn't talk about it. talk about this in the refinement, bring it in and go, is our product the one output? Check your backlog. On the other side, I've got Jeff Peterson. He talks about this around diversity, especially as a psychologist. And I just want to point something out here. Equality of outcome is bad. What does that mean? If I have to hit 20 story points because I have to hit 20 story points, I'm going to pull in 20 story points. You're maximizing equality for outcome. And if every team is expected to do 20 story points, because let's do collective velocity here, you've set the wrong status quo. Rather, when we talk about swarming, especially if you're working in a team of teams, it's about equality of opportunity. As a Scrum Master, does my fellow Scrum Master have the same opportunities as me to swarm on that higher-arching vision, product, and problem that we're both jointly working on? What are their blockers? What are my blockers? Because as Scrum Masters, we have to sync as Scrum Masters to make sure there's equal opportunity to swarm on the key value, but also equal opportunity to voice what we think is blocking the flow and where we need to swarm. It's always going to be that louder person that's like, I know the best, and everyone else goes, and we're all going to follow. And it's a bit like lemmings. You don't want one lemming always leading everyone off a cliff, or you'll never get past level 1. Finally, the patented zombie apocalypse, the tricks, the tips, and I've brushed on it before, refinement. Rogue stories that belong to other features or PDIs. I call these zombie stories. They will kill your team, they will kill your output, and they will kill your quality. These are the 3 smells. Will the stories cause context switching? Did you put context switching into your goal? And finally, if it's been cloned more than once, ask why. We're using tools like Jira, and so many times, if you're a Scrum Master and you're finding you're cloning and you're only changing the acceptance criteria, it's probably not the best idea. Ask why. What is the value? And do not pull back in stories from a different feature as a tiny little one that we're just going to fix. And then it doesn't disappear from 3 sprints. These just keep building up in your backlog and they appear in it. And the team knows because they roll their eyes. This is that story that you've pulled in that's too big. And they're like, we've been working on this forever. No, we should have got some valuable output after the first sprint. It shouldn't feel like we're working on this forever. You are the hero as a Scrum Master taking your team through a journey. They should be going through levels of achievement, of value for that product for the customer. So kill zombies and take a shotgun to your backlog and teach your product owner how to do that too. That's the most thing. That's all about me. Let's whack on. Some tips at the end of the slide, some links and some extra learning. I am done. And if you want to learn anything else about techniques, that's a really great book.
Jana, thank you very much. And thank you for the plug where I brought Emma's new puppy into it. That gives me some confidence that one day I might actually also make a good Scrum Master or Agile coach. Okay, so thank you very much to all of our speakers this evening. You know, a big thank you to Ben, Nancy, John, Emma, Anik, and Jana. As I say, they've all spoken before, and I think we can all agree that tonight's Super 6 event was equally as good. I wanted it to be rapid fire, and it was just that. I wanted to get 6 great speakers to speak for 60 minutes on the 6th of the month at 6 o'clock, and we will definitely be doing this again. I believe my next Super 6 will be in October now, and Agile London is back next week. Now, one of my speakers for next week has just informed me today that at the very last minute, his house move went through and he might be moving next week. So do keep an eye on the Agile London meetup page for details of who will be speaking. I did put a post out today, and I'm hoping that I can still have Arif and Kewan, the authors of the Hero Transformation Playbook, speak, but it might not be the case. So just keep an eye on it. I will have an event next week. It's going to be Wednesday at 6 o'clock. So do keep an eye on that. This event was recorded. It will go up on our YouTube channel as every other event does. But once again, thank you so much for the speakers of the the debut Super 6 event. And I hope to see everyone very soon. Have a lovely evening, everyone.